At the age of 98, University of Illinois emeritus professor Fred Kummerow still has a great memory. He has to. 20 years after retiring at the age of 78, he still employs a small team of scientists who work in his university laboratory to study the causes of heart disease. He has other traits that keep him going. He has an insatiable curiosity, he is ambitious, and he's not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom.
We came to this country when I was 9 years old, and my parents finally got citizenship, and I got derivative citizenship from them. My father had relatives in Milwaukee, and they provided the money for us to come over here. But in 1928, everything collapsed. He was out of a job from 1928 until 1935. And we had a really, we lived on my $5 a week newspaper route.
Kummerow still remembers how the family survived hard economic times in the U.S., getting by on government-supplied powdered milk, sugar, and flour. He remembers stealing little squares of yeast from the local Piggly Wiggly so his mother could bake bread. He still remembers going to night school 4 nights a week at the University of Wisconsin Extension Division.
And I'd study on a streetcar, going there. I couldn't do it coming home, I was too damn tired.
His tenacity got him a summer job at the Miller Brewing Company in Milwaukee, earning him enough money to enroll at the University of Wisconsin in Madison the following fall.
I was given an assistantship, $50 a week, a month, so I was in clover.
When Kummerow graduated, he immediately registered as a graduate student in biochemistry. His advisor was biochemistry professor Harry Steenbach, who had discovered in 1923 that ultraviolet light increased the vitamin D content of foods. Steenbach was a lipid biochemist, and so Kummerow, too, entered the field. Now having conducted more than 6 decades of research into the role of dietary lipids in health and heart disease, Kummerow has something to say on the subject. First of all, he rejects the half-century-old idea that the cholesterol in foods like eggs, butter, cheese, meat, or milk is a villain that contributes to heart disease.
Good cholesterol is cholesterol in foods like an egg, cheese, meat, or fish. And that cholesterol is cholesterol that has been used to fry fats, for example.
Kummerow explains that frying foods like chicken or potato chips or French fries in oil that is used over and over again changes the chemical structure of the fats and the cholesterol that is naturally in some foods. This results in oxidized cholesterols, oxysterols, which are dangerous to health. He knows this because he has looked at the levels of oxidized cholesterols in the blood plasma of people who had bypass operations. He and his colleagues found that people with high levels of oxidized lipids in their blood plasma were at greatest risk of heart disease, regardless of their cholesterol levels.
We had the plasma, the blood, from people who had bypass operations, and we also had the oxysterol content in their blood. We measured the oxysterol content in their blood. And they had more oxysterols in their blood.
Heart actually in operation here. It beats about 100,000 times a day, in which operation it pumps about 10,000 quarts of blood.
Kummerow looked more closely at the chemistry of the arteries of people who had bypass operations. He compared their arteries to those from the placenta of newborn babies, and he made an important observation. The proportion of 2 important membrane components shifted as people aged. The arteries of infants contained about 10% sphingomyelin and 50% phosphatidylcholine. These are 2 of several phospholipids that make up the membranes of all cells. In infants, the sphingomyelin content was very low, only 10%.
But the interesting thing was that when we looked at the arteries of people who had bypass operations, we found up to 40% sphingomyelin and about 27% phosphatidylcholine.
The ratio of sphingomyelin to phosphatidylcholine had shifted, with much more sphingomyelin in the membranes than before.
So now, why did this happen? And that took us another 10 years before we could find out why this happened.
Kummerow and his colleagues looked at epithelial cells, the kind of cells that line the arteries, grown in the blood plasma of people with and without heart disease. They had already noticed that the heart patients had a lot more oxysterols in their blood. Now they saw that the oxysterols increased the proportion of sphingomyelin in the healthy cells and the influx of calcium into cells. Calcium accumulation in the arteries is one sign of atherosclerosis.
Calcium adheres to the sphingomyelin because the sphingomyelin now has a negative charge in the presence of salt water. And of course, there's salt in the artery of all of us. The calcium gradually accumulates until the coronary arteries get so filled with calcium that it blocks the flow of blood to the coronary artery. And the coronary arteries are the one that feed the heart. So if you don't have blood coming into the heart muscle can't function anymore. And so that person dies.
Cardiac failure. If I'd only known sooner. Oh, well, there's nothing to be done about it now.
Kummerow was one of the first to see a link between hydrogenated oils in the diet and heart disease, and he has long advocated for a ban on the use of trans fats in food. He even filed a petition with the Food and Drug Administration in 2009 to ban partially hydrogenated fats from the American diet. He and his colleagues also showed that trans fats and oxidized fats interfere with the normal blood flow by blocking the synthesis of a factor in the blood that keeps the blood fluid. All in all, Kummerow is proud of his decades of work to understand the causes of heart disease, and he offers some simple advice that seems to have contributed, in part at least, to his own health and lifespan.
If you don't eat hydrogenated fat, and if you don't eat oxidized fat, you're going to live longer than if you do. So if you eat what nutritionists consider a well-balanced diet, and don't eat too much fried foods, you might be able to eat some, but you can't eat too much of it. Then you'll never have to worry about heart disease. That's what I believe.